Well, thanks very much for the cooperation between the Senate and the House for this joint agriculture committee. I have invited a friend of mine, an advocate for agriculture, and to come here today to speak to us. He's been already to the Advocacy Expo, which is going on this week. Trent and I met 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when he spoke to the Iowa State Agriculture Engineering Group. And from there, I have gotten a lot of great information from him, also a lot of connections and people to help with anything with agriculture issues. So Trent's from Nebraska, Loup City, Nebraska, right in the middle, and he's been a farmer and rancher his entire life. So, ladies and gentlemen, my friend Trent Loos.
I think I'm going to stand. I think they're standing. Of course, I think better with a hat on too, but I was told not to do that. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today, and I find myself in a pretty interesting situation that I called people on the way over in my office. So I travel quite a bit. I get the opportunity to return phone calls in my F-150, and I told them I was going to the Iowa State Capitol to speak to the House and the Senate about agriculture, the Ag Committee. Seems like the Ag Committee would know about agriculture, particularly in the state of Iowa. And it's interesting that 13 years ago, I started being an advocate for agriculture because I didn't think the kid in the grocery store knew enough about where their food comes from. And I believe every one of us in here, if we've had any ties to agriculture at all, we've voiced the frustration that, isn't it terrible that the kid thinks his milk comes from a factory out behind the grocery store? The great irony of that statement is I began doing what I'm doing today, transferring from a sixth generation United States farmer who did not go to college because I knew I was going to be involved in livestock agriculture the rest of my life, into someone who spends more time on the road talking about agriculture than actually home getting my hands dirty doing it every day. And I started that because I agreed 100%. Kids don't know enough about where their food comes from. And today I'm standing here in front of you, the state capitol in Des Moines, Iowa, telling you that the greatest problem is too much of what they know isn't so. We have a very squeaky wheel, not one entity, many entities, that with an 8-foot cubicle and a website, a blog, social media, have the ability to put forth misinformation about what is happening in our nation's food supply, unlike any time before. And I spoke last year in 35 states, 3 Canadian provinces, and Queensland, Australia. And I find it interesting, in all of those places we have the same exact problem, is that people don't understand, number one, who, where, and how their food is produced. And particularly in the United States, where this year we are celebrating 150 years since 1862, when during the Lincoln administration, the United States Department of Agriculture was created, the land grant system was put into place, and that land grant system, with Iowa State being right here up the road, one of the premier land grant institutions in the country, we have made giant strides in progress in taking the resources and feeding more with less. And in fact, we do that so well today that very few people know what it is that happens to make that come together. And we go to the grocery store, and we just expect the food to be there. And many of my colleagues in agriculture say, well, if people don't understand where their food comes from, the day is coming when they're going to go to the grocery store and it's not going to be there. They're going to be empty shelves. We're never going to have empty shelves in our grocery stores. Our question is, where did the food originate in our grocery store? And I think the case in point is pretty well made. When we as a nation became 65% dependent on foreign lands for our energy, we then had a wake-up call from Mother Nature, as she likes to do from time to time, slap us in the face and say that a nation that depends on 65% of its energy from foreign lands is vulnerable. And then you know the story about renewable energies and how we've tried to turn the tide, and now we produce 14 billion gallons of ethanol each year in the United States. And the interesting thing about that is we've exceeded what the mandate is in ethanol production in the United States from farms. We still import more oil from foreign nations than we did before we had ethanol. Bottom line is that we need a lot of resources. So, interesting, Friday I spoke at Oklahoma State University. Last Monday I spoke at Penn State. And I continue to hear people say, we just need to encourage the next generation of farmers. These kids in the land-grant colleges like Iowa State, we just need to encourage them to be involved in agriculture. Truth of the matter is that we need to get out of their way. They offer more energy, more enthusiasm and excitement about the future of agriculture and feeding the world than any population that I work with. It's absolutely incredible. It just fuels my tank to go from one land-grant college to the next and visit with these young people. And they are driven to make sure that food purchase decisions are based upon facts rather than negative rhetoric that people can have access to on the internet. As Representative Sweeney said, I did come here from the Iowa Beef Expo. I just stopped by there briefly. Actually had a little bit of time on the big show. And right now, if you're familiar with the beef industry, some of us have been very involved, know that we have a record low number of beef breeding animals in the United States. 27 million head of beef breeding cows in the United States. And yet we produce twice as much human consumable protein as we did in 1950. Because we produce more with less. The dairy industry in 1945 had 24 million dairy cows. Today we have less than 9 million dairy cows in the United States, and we produce 3 times as much total milk as we did in 1945 because we produce more with less. In fact, Dr. Jude Kepp at Washington State University recently put out a study that says, compared to that gallon of milk produced in 1945, it only requires 10% of the land mass to produce the same gallon of milk that it did in 1945. It only requires 35% of the amount of water that it did to produce the same gallon of milk in 1945. And we emit 63% less carbon per gallon of milk than we did in 1945. That's the success story of American agriculture. If General Motors had a car that was half as efficient as the American farmer in every segment of food production, CNN wouldn't stop talking about how green the American agricultural system is. But we in agriculture use the term efficiency, and the non-farm folks cannot relate to the term efficiency, and we allowed some pseudo-environmentalists to hijack the term green. But we are the green movement, we being people closest to the land. I think my favorite story today, and for whatever reason, now we've got a whole new level of attacks, Frank, on biotechnology and crop production. And I heard report after report coming over here this morning talking about how we're going to have 9.3 billion people on the planet in 2050. The United Nations said in December that we will need to produce 74% more meat to meet the growing demand for protein by 2050. We will need to produce 58% more dairy products to meet the growing demand by 2050. And then they went on to say, and we need to do that by making sure every family has a goat. That's amazing to me, that we have the ability in this country to produce what is needed to meet the global demand for protein for the essentials of life, and yet continually our methods are not understood and rejected because, quite frankly, it's our fault. I don't stand here and blame the soccer mom for not knowing what we've been doing on our farms and ranches. It's the farmer who has continued to do more with less and not left any time to tell the story. Because, to be real honest, farmers are typically white European in heritage, and they're like my grandfather from Germany who continued until his death at the age of 88 saying, Trent, I don't know why you don't just stay home and work hard, and everything else will take care of itself. And that's not how it is today. We have to work hard, but we also have to be an advocate for what it is that we do. I had the opportunity a lot to visit with young people through land-grant colleges, but also FFA kids. And I like to go into a group of green hands and ask these green hands, I want you to finish this sentence for me. Agriculture is, and I will get 15 different answers about what agriculture is. All the way from growing crops, to tending to animals, to tending to the land. And I think that it's not hard to figure out why people that are not involved in agriculture don't understand agriculture when we don't ourselves in the agriculture clearly define what it is that we do. To me, it's very clear. Agriculture is the conversion of natural resources into human consumable products that improve mankind. Without agriculture, mankind ceased to exist. Food, fibers, pharmaceuticals, and fuel. And it seems like such a basic premise. But the truth of the matter is, people outside of the heartland, what is recognized as the flyover region, don't even get what it is that drives us in the heartland of America. Case in point, yesterday I was listening to National Public Radio. I listen to National Public Radio about every morning so that I know what I need to fix on my radio programs for the rest of the day because it got screwed up. And I heard the mayor of Muscatine, Iowa, on National Public Radio talking about this second most historical event in Muscatine since Khrushchev in 61 or 62 visited Muscatine. So now we've got this Chinese vice president visiting there today. And the mayor kept talking about the hospitality and how we care about people. And we showed this guy a good time when he was here 25 years ago, and he just wanted to come back and see his friends. People on the coast don't get that. They don't get that we care about people. They don't get that we're involved in agriculture, not because it's the economy and the lifeblood of the state of Iowa, which it obviously is. We're involved in agriculture because we know the sense of accomplishment, and we know at the end of the day we improve the human life. And we can sit and visit, as my grandfather said, one-on-one, and understand this is what we're doing. We're providing for people what they need to improve their life. And we have so many misnomers. One of my latest ones, and I know it's been an issue here, and I don't know how many times I have people tell me the story about the city of Des Moines. It spends $1 million a day removing the nitrates from the water so that we can drink it in the city of Des Moines. And then what do we do on the south side of the city of Des Moines? We put the nitrates back into the water. Just a little thing like that that people don't understand. Nitrates are not poison. Nitrates are a nutrient that must be present in life at the right amount, or we do not have a healthy ecosystem. I've become very good friends with a guy by the name of Dr. Nathan Bryant. He is a biomedical researcher at the University of Texas, Brown Institute of Molecular Medicine in Houston, Texas. He is the global authority on dietary nitrate, and he has convinced me pretty easily that all Americans are nitrate deficient. We don't have enough nitrates in our system. In fact, there's a really sad part of that is that he has for 12 years been talking about how to change your diet to improve your nitrate presence, your production of nitric oxide. I can't get into the science, but I can tell you that you consume nitrates, it's converted into nitric oxide, it fuels your immune system, and promotes cardiovascular health. And 50% of all Americans are deficient in dietary nitrate. So in December, second Thursday of December, I went to Las Vegas, not because the National Finals Rodeo was in town, but because there was 6,000 medical doctors at the Global Anti-Aging Conference. Dr. Nathan Bryant is presenting to these medical doctors who, by the way, have regularly told their patients, please refrain from eating processed meats because of the nitrates. Everybody in this room has somebody that they know where their medical doctor has told them don't eat that hot dog because of the nitrates. How many in this room have ever had a doctor tell you don't eat lettuce because of the nitrates? Would you be surprised to know that there is 80 times more nitrate in one piece of lettuce than there is in one hot dog? A misnomer about healthy living. In fact, I sat through this presentation where Dr. Nathan Bryant told these 6,000 medical doctors that only 5% of the dietary nitrate comes from the meat sector. Everything else comes from leafy greens. So I come home pretty well convinced. Oh, by the way, one thing I was going to tell you that's frustrating. For 12 years, Nathan Bryant has been talking about improving your dietary nitrate consumption to lead to healthier living. USA Today went to his lab 3 times, looked at his science. 3 times did not write a story because they didn't understand it. Dr. Nathan Bryant then, 3 years ago, put together a supplement, a tablet, where you can take nitrate on a daily basis. USA Today went down there and wrote a great story about the benefit of dietary nitrate, and you can buy it in a pill. He didn't want to sell it in a pill. He wanted people to change their diet and their lifestyle, but they couldn't grasp that. So I'm sitting in this meeting, I come home, I fly into Denver, I'm going to drive home that night. I get into Denver about 12 o'clock. I'm driving to Sterling, Colorado, 1:30, I get tired. I pull into a hotel with a country kitchen on there that's attached. I get there for breakfast the next morning. I sit down after just being at a meeting where I learned that everybody, 50% of all Americans, are nitrate deficient. I sit down at a breakfast table, and there's a disclaimer on my table that says, warning, our water contains a high level of nitrate. If you are concerned about this, please notify your server you would like us to cook your food in bottled water. So I got my phone off, I took a picture, I posted to Facebook. I see my server looking at me like, oh goodness, here I'm going to get another butt chewing about our bad water. I called her at my table and I said, why aren't you marketing this? She looked back, like, what are you talking about? I said, well, what's your nitrate level? She said, well, we have 12 parts per million of nitrate in our water, and if you have over 10 parts per million, the government says you have to warn people. I said, well, that's interesting. Do you know what mother's breast milk is at day 1 on parts per million of nitrate? 100. So I'm wondering what it is that the government knows that God hasn't figured out yet. The truth of the matter is that we don't really understand healthy living. And the biggest misnomer that troubles me is that I see all of these parents carrying around their hand sanitizer and all their antibiotic things on them all the time. They immunize their kid. They try to create this sterile environment for the kid. The kid goes to the county fair, pets a goat, and gets E. coli 15787. I have 3 daughters, 14, 9, and 7. I personally know over 100,000 farm families. Do you know how many of those farm families have ever had a kid that got E. coli 15787, even though they breathe in animal manure that contains it every day? I know one farm family from Minnesota out of a couple 100,000. Why don't our kids get E. coli 15787? Not a rhetorical question. Because we develop a natural immunity. We have a research project that comes out of New Zealand that shows farmers who breathe animal manure are 5 times less likely to contract any disease than the non-farm public because we inoculate ourselves and we become constantly developing this immunity. And I put all of that in the context of understanding healthy living and that we have moved so far away from that. And we need to bring it back to what's basic and what is real. You know, one of my other conversations that I have to share with you because it is the most common conversation that I'll have in an airport. I literally will be just walking through an airport and have a 30, 40-something-year-old career woman walk up to me. Number one, they're employed, they have kids at home, they're very intelligent. Consequently, they read a lot of information, not necessarily credible information. But they'll walk. The first question is always the same, and I've never understood it. It is, are you a real cowboy? Although I always answer it the same way. Well, man, it depends on your definition of a real cowboy. Mine happens to be anyone who is willing to follow the spirit that resides within themselves to see a task to completion, and then be willing to accept the responsibility and the result of a real cowboy. If that's your definition, yes, I qualify. Which she'll usually respond by saying, whatever. What I really want to know is what are you counting? Putting in the nation's beef supplies, causing these young girls to reach puberty at earlier ages. I am so glad you asked me about that, ma'am. Because you see, our young girls today are reaching puberty 18 months before their mothers, 24 months before their grandmothers. But do you know what hormone we use in the beef industry? Estrogen. In fact, if you take a 3-ounce serving of beef, grass-fed, organic, or natural, never had any additional estrogen, that 3-ounce serving of beef will have 1.39 nanograms of estrogen. A 3-ounce serving of beef from a conventionally produced steer that's been administered 2 doses of estrogen in the growing phase, that 3-ounce serving will have 1.89 nanograms of estrogen. 1.39 compared to 1.89 is not statistically significant. Also keep in mind, the average garden salad has 1,200 nanograms of estrogen. The average cabbage leaf has 2,000 nanograms of estrogen. The average tablespoon of soybean oil has 28,000 nanograms of estrogen. And ma'am, you're not on birth control pills, are you? The average birth control pill has 34,000 nanograms of estrogen. There's nothing wrong with estrogen. But what I have a great concern with is we have a bunch of people that are out here promoting we have to stay away from science and technology that has allowed us to feed more people with less resources than ever before and meet the global demand for food, fiber, pharmaceuticals, and fuel. And we can do that quite easily if we would just look at the basic facts and understand what it takes for healthy living. Which leads me into my biggest pet peeve, and probably no better week to address this particular issue in light of what McDonald's has done this week, in light of what the most wealthy animal rights organization in the world has done earlier today here in the city of Des Moines, talking about eliminating sow gestation, talking about eliminating cages in the egg-laying industry, talking about eliminating the tool to promote healthy animals leading to safe food supplies called antibiotics. There's a country that has done all of this that we are told we should do. Excuse me, there's 27 countries that band together in the name of the European Union. In 1997, 20% of the food consumed in the European Union was imported. In 2011, 54% of the food consumed in the European Union was imported because they have banned, and I forgot to even mention biotechnology and crop production, not accepted in the European Union. Consequently, they have become more reliant upon foreign countries to supply their food. Oh, and by the way, since 1997, the cost of food per capita in the European Union has increased by 33%. What part of that do we want to try to sell to our constituents? You see, we hear from the 2 to 3% that really don't care what food costs. We never hear about the 97%, we don't hear about often enough, the 97% that truly just want access to healthy, safe, reasonably priced food. And nobody in the world has the ability to produce more with less than the United States because of what we've accomplished through land-grant institutions and implementing science and technology. That's at the end of the day what we care about, producing more with less. Last January I spoke in Napa Valley in California, and we were sitting there before we got on a wine train. Kelly McDonald, the executive chef, was talking about all of the green mantras that they've implemented in this Napa wine train. And then he closed this, which I applauded him. It's tremendous that we become more efficient with the natural resources. That's what we are about in agriculture. And then he closed by saying, and I think you ladies will be happy to know that the beef you're going to receive at noon today comes from cattle that were never fed corn, we fed them barley. Why did he care about those cattle receiving barley as opposed to corn? Anybody know?
They're known for feed being in the Northwest.
Pardon?
They're known for feed being in the Northwest.
It is plentiful in the Northwest, and his reason was that there is no genetic modified variety of barley. So ultimately, during lunch, guess whose table he sat at? And we had a little discussion, and I said, Kelly, first of all, I applaud you for your efficient utilization of natural resources. I said, but I'm curious about your barley statement. Why do you care that your cattle only have barley? And he told me, he said, well, because there's no genetically modified variety of barley. I said, what's the dangers of consuming genetically modified feed of any type? He said, I don't know that there's any, but I don't know why we should take a chance. I said, here's why we should take a chance. By the way, I find it ironic, people talking about no genetically modified crops in their consumption while they're drinking wine. Beside that, I said, here's why we should take a chance, Kelly. Have you heard the Dirty 30s? A period of time from 1930 to 1937, when Mother Nature had her way in harsh summers and years without rain, and practically the Great Plains blew to, we saw dirt from Oklahoma end up in New York City, and it was just environmental devastation and families' lives were ruined. He said, of course, I know history. I said, would you be surprised to know that from 2000 to 2007, we had less measurable precipitation in the Great Plains of America each year than we did from 1930 to 1937. And not only did we not relive the Dust Bowl, we produced more food each year in the Great Plains of America with less measurable precipitation. And we did that because we implemented the best in conservation. I want to tell you what, I was in Louisiana the other day, and pardon the French is about to come, but the Louisiana farmer is pissed at the Iowa farmer. It used to be that every year they would get a new level of topsoil. And they tell me that they haven't gotten any new topsoil for 15 years. Because we've implemented conservation practices and minimum tillage. Because we've put in place biotech crops that we now have corn hybrids that can sit there waiting for up to 3 weeks, waiting for that half-inch of rain so that we can make a crop. Take for case in point, this happened in January last year before the drought of the summer, and throughout the drought of the summer we heard the corn belts, not getting rain, not getting rain, corn crop's going to be a wreck, corn's going to be $12. And we had the 4th largest corn crop in the history of the United States because of all the things that I just talked about. That's why we take a chance on biotechnology. When I told that story to Kelly McDonald, he said, you know, I never thought about it like that. Nobody ever explained it to me in that way. It is about implementing science and technology and being more efficient to produce more with less. One story that I want to close with, and I hope there's time for questions, if you have any, is I think probably the most common misnomer that I personally get just in general conversations as I travel and speak to people is I'll get people who will come up to me and say, well, I'm just one person, I can't make a difference. I know right from wrong. Right now we're in this era, Marty, where everybody's coming to me saying, I want to be an advocate. I want to be an advocate for agriculture. You know the best qualification, the most important trait in being an advocate, whether it's for agriculture, or whether it's for living in Iowa, or whether it's working on the railroad, the most important component of being an advocate is being a good listener. And hearing what people say that's not correct. And planting that little seed of doubt, making them think about something like they've never thought about it before. And when you get one young person, like I had last week at Oklahoma State, come up to me and she said, I want to be an advocate, but I'm only one person, I can't make a difference. I shared with her a story of one person making a huge difference. And this country is really built on a series of one people stepping outside of their comfort zone, making a difference. But several years ago in the state of Michigan, like many rural communities in Iowa, we are ill-guided in our educational ways and thinking that we can move away from tech, shop class, ag classes, FFA organizations. Harbor Beach, Michigan was a community of 2,000 people, still is today. It's in the thumb of Michigan, a very vibrant farming community. They had 80 kids in the FFA. Harbor Beach decided they could no longer afford an FFA in their school. So a group of the students in the FFA said, we can't allow that to happen because Harbor Beach is about agriculture. Well, the principal caught wind that the students were talking about doing something at the upcoming graduation that could possibly generate public sentiment to save the FFA. So 2 days before graduation, the principal of this school in Harbor Beach calls an entire school assembly, brings the kids in and says, if anybody attempts to do anything in graduation this year to generate public sentiment for any group, you will not receive your diploma this year. 18-year-old young man by the name of Daniel Nowinski tells him to this day that when he went to the podium to give his valedictorian speech, he really didn't know what he was going to say. but what he said I will never forget. He said, I came here today and I got to thinking that we all have to live with the decisions that we make every day for the rest of our life. But he said, I've also come to the realization that we have to live with the decisions that we don't make every day for the rest of our life. And that 18-year-old young man pulled out of his pocket the FFA sash, put it on in front of that community, in front of that administration, in front of that group of parents. That was in 2003. I spoke last year, March 22nd, to FFA students in Harbor Beach, Michigan, because one young man understood the most important language that really is the basis of the republic that we live in, representative republic that we live in. If it is to be, it's up to me. I learned a lot from an 18-year-old young man, and I learn a lot every day that I have to leave what I care most about, which is my family and my ranch in central Nebraska. That I'm continually motivated by what it is that we do in agriculture. It's not building an economy. It's about finding ways to provide the essentials of life that improves mankind. And at the end of the day, that's what we do better than any other country in the world, and we are best positioned to meet that need for the essentials of life, food, fiber, pharmaceuticals, and fuel. Thank you for granting me the opportunity to visit with you today, and I'd be glad to